I'm talking about where did the Pharisee come from. Introduction. There are four different parties or groups that played the most prominent roles among the leadership sects in first century Jewish life. They were the Pharisees, Sadducees, Essens, and Zealots. The Pharisees were important among them, those who are considered one of the most influential groups in Judaism in the time of Christ and the early church. Who were the Pharisees? The Pharisees were the religious leaders. They were the leaders of synagogue and the members of Sanhedrin. The Pharisees were strictly devoted to law. They were a legalistic and separatist group who strictly kept the law of Moses and the unwritten tradition of the elders. They were the official interpreters of the law and the teachers of the law. They considered themselves to the authorized successors of Moses as teachers of the law. Their primary domain was the synagogue, and their foremost concern was to create a fence around the Torah. That is to explain that various Mosaic laws meant and how they applied so that devout Israelites would know exactly how to obey God in any situation they might confront. They accepted only the Pentateuch as authoritative. In the day of Herod, their sect controlled the temple. The Pharisees were ritualistic and rationalistic. They are strictly adherents of Jewish tradition. They are the political leaders of the Jews. Where from the Pharisee, where did the Pharisee come from? The Pharisees were the successor of Hasidim. Pious Jews was joined force with the Maccabees during the struggle for freedom from Syrian oppression. They were first called Pharisees during the reign of John Hyrcanus in 130 35 to 105 BC. They were hypocritical, envious, rigid, and formalistic. The Pharisees emerged as an the Pharisees emerged as an identifiable group during the intertestamental period, the years between the Old and New Testaments. Alexander the Great was one of the major players in the process of creating the needs for the Pharisee, who built his empire in Palestine from the 336 to 323 BC. Alexander and his successor encouraged the adoption of Greek culture, literature, institution, entertainment, ideas, names, norms, coins, and Greek language, all of which uh, further eroded the unique identity of the Jews. Alexander's promotion of Greek culture set the stage for subsequent residence by the Pious. After Alexander's empire was parceled out, Israel first was ruled by the Egyptian ruler Ptolemy in 301 to 198 BC. Israel enjoyed peace, prosperity, and relative religious autonomy under the Egyptian rulers. In 203 BC, Antiochus III, a Syrian ruler, captured Jerusalem and began the Seleucid rule in Palestine for more than a century. However, the Seleucids were not very willing to extend autonomy to the Jews and were much more intent on promoting Greek culture. During his period, the Pharisees almost surely were galvanized an into an identifiable group. During the reign of notorious and Antiochus 4 called Epiphanes, the event in Palestine worst and spurred the emergence of the Pharisees, a class of cultures, culture uh, erupted between the Orthodox and the Hellenistic Jews. The clash was about the selection of the high priest. The Orthodox viewed that priesthood as a spiritual office attained by divine call, but the Hellenistic Jews connived, connived to make the high priesthood a political office given to highest bidder. In Antiochus sought to remove all stress of Orthodox Jewish faith. He tried to link the Greeks Jupiter with God and forbid Jews. The abominable action of Antiochus IV was a straw that broke the back of Seleucid power in Palestine and launched the Maccabees revolt. The conflict occasionally resulted in bloodshed. In this setting, the Pharisees became prominent. During the reign of John Hyrcanus I, Josephus cited the Pharisees as an official party. The Pharisees were the party that continued the ideology of the Patrick Maccabean movement that had first taken a stand for a law and the religious integrity of Judaism. The pursuits of the Pharisee in the century before the birth of Jesus shifted with the occupants of the political power in Israel. The Hasmonean warrior king Alexander Genius showed little respect for the priestly responsibility. He alienated the Pharisees and grew to despise them and crucified 800 Pharisees. But surprisingly, on his deathbed, Alexander instructed his wife to distance herself from the Sadducees and reign with the help of Pharisees. Salome Alexander accepted her husband's advice and supported the Pharisees. The that is referred to as the golden age of Phariseeism. During this time, the Pharisees had considerable political clout, social influence, and religious impact. Politically, they were the neck that controlled the heart of state. Josephus implied that the Pharisees possessed the royal authority. Socially, they emphasized education based on the scripture. Religiously, they exert their influence in the synagogues. Eventually, they supplanted the priest as the authoritative interpreters of the law. The Pharisees dominated the spiritual heartbeat of the nation. The Pharisees were orthodox in the sense of holding to the old ways and central doctrines of the religions of Israel. Their doctrines were derived from Persia or were developed under the Persian influence of ideas that were implicit in the Hebrew religion. They seem to have first made their debut at some point between 150 to 140 BC in the area that would later become modern Israel. When they first found, they were made up of ordinary people such as scribes who taught within the Jewish temple or the synagogue. They were granted the highest leadership roles within the temple. The Pharisees were political group and distinctive sect of Jews from the ancient Middle East. They are often credited as the founders of modern Judaism. The origin of the religious profession of Rabbi has been linked to the ancient Pharisee. Before the public ministry of Jesus Christ, the two great parties of Judaism that we read in the New Testament, the Pharisee and the Sadducee, were recognizably born. Both were prominent at the time of the Christ, and Phariseeism continues to this day. Belief of the Pharisee. The Pharisee believed in the angel and the resurrection of the dead and the afterlife. They believed that their circumcision was necessary. The Torah was their sacred text. They believed a uh, that a Messiah would one day arrive and issue in a time of peace and prosperity, because the Messiah would come as an earthly ruler and help the Israelites subdue the nation. One special aspect of their faith was their belief regarding the afterlife, in which God would reward the righteous by allowing them into paradise, while the evil were punished and cast into hell. They believed that God created the world and chose Israel as his chosen people. According to Phariseeism, God's grace extended only to those who kept his law. The Pharisees believed in divine purpose in history. The course of event in over overruled by divine providence following God's plan. The Pharisee believed in supreme authority in religion, the scripture first tradition. Conclusion: the Pharisees were very important spiritual and political leaders among the Jews. They have a lot of contribution to the Jewish nation. They had a great influence on the Jewish people. Their spirituality and teaching conflicted with the Jesus teaching and spirituality, but relationship between the Pharisee and Jesus are not always controversial. Some Pharisee in, um, invited Jesus to come to their homes to have dinner with them. Some Pharisees believed Jesus and followed him. Among the Pharisees, some prominent Pharisees are Nicodemus, who was a member of Jews ruling council, Gamaliel, who was a teacher of the law and honored by all people, and Apostle Paul. Paul believed in Jesus Christ, and later he became a prominent spiritual leader for the believers of the early church. And finally, their characteristic, the doctrines which become the background for the uh, earliest Christian theology. The Pharisee truly uh, dominated the spiritual heartbeat of the nation of Jews.